It's great to welcome to the program today Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi, representing New York's 3rd Congressional District. Congressman, it's great to have you on. You know, we were just talking with the audience and with our team about just the last 2 weeks with regard to Ukraine and Russia.
Ugh.
So many of your counterparts on the other side of the aisle refusing to even acknowledge that Russia was the aggressor. When asked, well, what will Russia give up in the negotiations? Things like they've given up a lot already. You know, they've lost people in this war that they started. Tell me what's happening behind the scenes in terms of, do your Republican colleagues genuinely seem to be buying into the narrative that's coming down from the Oval Office? Or do they have a different view on the aggressor and what should happen there?
Well, one size doesn't fit all. One of the things that screwed us up in our country is that people say the Republicans, the Democrats, and
Hmm.
not a one size fits all thing. There are some members of Congress on the Republican side that have stood up and said uh, Trump is wrong. It's clear that Putin is the dictator and Zelensky was democratically elected by 73% of the vote in Ukraine in an election that was certified by the commission in Europe that certifies that you have a free and fair election. So, that one's obvious to many of us, but it has to be repeated often that Putin is the dictator and Zelensky was democratically elected. Secondly, Putin and Russia invaded Ukraine. And so they're trying to play these games with, that Ukraine caused the war by taking certain actions, saying they want to be in NATO and things like that. And that's what forced Russia to go kill and murder and rape and take tens of thousands of children as abductees into Russia. I mean, it's awful. I mean, I'm going a little off topic, but I mean the Russians literally abduct children from Ukraine
Hmm.
because their parents are working at the power plant and they want the parents to keep working. And to keep the parents working, they say, we've got your children. If you don't keep working, who knows what will happen to your children? I mean, it's just awful. So a lot of Republicans are coming around to recognize, or not, I don't want to say a lot. Some Republicans are coming around to recognize that we cannot reward Russia or Putin for this evil action that they have taken. And to do so would send the worst possible message, not only to the Ukrainians and to Poland, but to the little neighboring countries of Lithuania and Latvia and Estonia and Moldova that are all terrified of what Putin's going to do next, because he's already sending disinformation campaigns in there. And it would send a terrible message to China. It would send it's sending terrible message to our allies that we've abandoned our historic commitment to democracy and our allies. So
What
some
do you
Republicans
think
coming around.
underlies this attitude, in the sense of, it has always seemed as though, to a degree, Donald Trump is really impressed by these authoritarians. He's impressed with the way in which they ignore public opinion and sort of social benefit. He's impressed by the way in which, in China, you are very quickly executed after dealing drugs, as he has told the story many times at rallies. So it seems that there's sort of a personal kind of thing there. Others believe that it's more nefarious with regard to business interests or whatever the case may be. What do you make of the underlying kind of motivation here?
Yeah, I don't know what the underlying motivation is. I feel like he does not have an appreciation for history. I think he doesn't have an appreciation for, what it took for our country to get to this point. And I don't think, and I think, unfortunately, sadly, too many Americans don't realize what a great country this really is. That we have this wonderful democracy and this e pluribus unum out of many one. I mean, I've just seen so many countries that people that are minority populations are just treated so terribly. And the autocrats, go after religious minorities. I mean, what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghurs, what they've done to the Tibetans, what they're doing to the Hong Kong students, what they're threatening to do to Taiwan. I mean, it's not just there; it's all over the world. So I don't think that Trump has an appreciation for our history. I think that he, came of age. I'm 62 years old myself. He's older than I am, obviously, but I think, he really started paying attention to politics under Reagan and loves the idea of trying to be a tough guy. But Reagan was a tough guy in the context of great love and respect for democracy and freedom.
Mm.
Trump tries to act like he's the tough guy. I really don't think he wants to be in confrontation. He wants to try and use bluster, and he'll back off whenever he gets challenged. He's like a bully that, when you're a kid, you fight back with a bully, you punch him in the face, and then they don't bully you anymore. I think that he's kind of like that. And I don't think he has a great respect for our history. Or, I was with a Republican at one point. I can't remember when it was exactly, but I said to him, if we appease Putin, we'll be just like Neville Chamberlain. And the Republican, who's the chairman of a committee, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, the chairman of a committee, a very powerful committee, responded to me, "Who's Neville Chamberlain?" It's like, what? It's like, so people, in case people don't know, Neville Chamberlain was in Britain who appeased Hitler
Yes.
to have peace in our time. And in reality, Hitler just, took advantage of that settlement and then went on to Czechoslovakia and to other places all the way through Paris and into England.
Congressman, you wrote a New York Times op-ed a few weeks before Donald Trump took office, and you talked in it about the importance of working together when possible and kind of acting in good faith, bipartisanship, et cetera. I spoke to your colleague Ro Khanna recently, who had a similar approach before the inauguration, and he said that seems increasingly implausible and impossible given what we have seen during these first 5 weeks of this administration. Has your view on the plausibility of that good faith bipartisanship also shifted in the last 5 weeks?
Well, there's no question that it's very difficult, but I'm not shifting in my belief that I believe that the only way forward for our country is to move beyond this divided sense that we have, and we have to figure out how to work together. So I'm choosing, for example, in the case of Ukraine, to highlight Brian Fitzpatrick, who has come out and very strongly in favor of Ukraine, against Russia, disagreeing with the president. I'm choosing to highlight Joe Wilson, who's one of the co-chairs of the Ukrainian caucus, a Republican, who's come out very strongly in favor of Ukraine and talking about how this is legacy defining and we have to support Ukraine. I'm choosing, in the case of DOGE and the case of the cuts that are being proposed, to highlight Republicans like a fellow problem solver. I'll talk about the problem solvers caucus later if you want me to, but Don Bacon from Nebraska, who won as a Republican in a Harris district, who came out and said the president's got to follow the law. The law is the law. You have to follow the law. What you're doing is not right. You have to come to Congress. A guy named Mario Diaz-Balart, who's a Republican from Florida, who came out and said, listen, I'm on the Appropriations Committee and Congress is responsible for the power of the purse, and I'm going to zealously defend it. Even a Freedom Caucus guy, Gary Palmer, an evangelical from Alabama, came out and said, you can't eliminate the Department of Education by executive order. You have to come to Congress to do that. So, there are some bright lights out there that we need to, fan those flames and try and make them get stronger. It's not easy to stand up to your own party. Historically, that's the hardest thing to do in politics. John F. Kennedy wrote the book Profiles in Courage. It was after 175 years of American history, and it was about people who stood up against their party for something they thought was right. But despite it was after 175 years of American history, there were only 8 people in that book. So it's not easy to stand up to your party. And we need to highlight those Republicans that are standing up to their party, or to the president, certainly, and to try and encourage bipartisan common ground, especially on those things that are basic American fundamental principles that we could share in common.
When it comes to taxes, we are in an interesting situation right now where some of the elements of the 2017 tax plan passed under Trump are now up for either being extended or will expire this year. And this includes potentially the SALT cap is back on the table, qualified business interest deduction, and a whole bunch of other things. On the one hand, it seems that when Republicans control the House, Senate, and the White House, they're just going to get what they want as far as the taxes go. On the other hand, there's also, listen, the SALT cap hit people in blue states disproportionately, who before were able to benefit at the federal level from the sometimes higher taxes that they paid at the state level. And so in a way, the SALT cap was a punishment to blue staters on average, right? I mean, not always.
Absolutely. There's no
So
question about that.
when it comes to your approach, given the realism that on the one hand, Democrats don't control anything right now, on the other hand, that Trump has said we might do something on the SALT cap, is your approach going in, we can't stop everything, but we're going to push hard to get the SALT cap up, or we're going to try to prevent them from passing this thing at all? Like, what are you thinking?
Well, right now we're got to count on the Republicans that are in these Democratic areas. There's like at least 10 of them, from New York and from California and
Yep.
some other states that have high state and local tax. People should understand what the state and local tax deduction is. SALT is state and local tax deduction. It was the first deduction put into the federal income tax code when they first adopted the idea of a federal income tax, just about over 100 years ago. And when they first proposed the idea, the governors and mayors came out and said, hey, we don't want you raising taxes at the federal level. We want to do it at the local level. You're going to screw us up if you collect them at the federal level.
Right.
They said, no, don't worry. The first deduction you're going to get is a state and local tax deduction. Anything you pay to your state or local governments will be deducted from your income, so you don't have to pay tax on the taxes you've already paid. So that was in place for 100 years. Trump and the Republicans took it away in 2017 and capped the deduction at $10,000. So I'm from New York. I think you're from Massachusetts. There are other people from high tax states with high state and local taxes, their property taxes, school taxes, state income taxes. They're much more than $10,000 in these places. And so it was a punishment. In fact, they asked Trump, they said, Mr. President, it's going to hurt what was then his home state. This is going to hurt the people in your home state of New York. He says, they didn't vote for me anyway.
Right.
So he did it on purpose. So I'm counting on the Republicans that are in these tough seats that need to get this back for them to fight. And they are fighting. They're saying, we will not vote for the tax bill unless you give us relief from this cap of $10,000. Now, that's illustrative of all these issues. The reason we're going to get Republicans to come to see the light is because they're going to see problems with national security, problems with the economy, and problems with their constituents telling them, we don't like these cuts. I was with a Republican last night. He says, I'm getting these crazy calls about all these people that are worried that Medicaid's going to be cut. 71 million Americans are on Medicaid because it was used through the Affordable Care Act. People who are in nursing homes are on the on Medicaid. So people are getting, we see these veterans that are all getting fired by DOGE. 5% of the workforce in America is veterans. 26% of the workforce in the federal government are veterans. So veterans are being disproportionately fired right now under DOGE. The more Republicans hear from the effects from their constituents, where Medicaid's getting cut, or SNAP is getting cut, or Head Start's getting closed down, or the local research given to your local college or university or scientific institution is being cut, the more they hear about this stuff, the more the constituents are going to complain to their members of Congress, the more you're going to see the Republicans push back the way that they need to.
How long do you and your colleagues think Elon Musk will last in his current role until the conflicting egos just inevitably explode and he's done?
I don't know. We all thought that was going to happen relatively quickly.
Yeah.
Seems that they're both kind of in on the joke a little bit, that they're both, kind of like running into the idea of that people are counting on them to bust up because of their egos. But it seems like President Trump is actually taking some sort of a subordinate role to Musk in certain ways. It's kind of weird, and it's kind of the whole thing's kind of odd. And the way that they're doing it, the DOGE cuts don't make any sense. I mean, I'm all for disrupting. Federal government's way too big, and there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. I agree with that. But the way they're doing it, I think, is going to end up costing more money to the federal government in the long run because they're violent.
Although I do want to jump in with one thing. You mentioned there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. I have not found a single dollar in actual fraud that they've identified so far. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Caroline Leavitt holds up, it's programs they don't like. But I think we want to make sure that we don't give them that. Like maybe there isn't as much fraud as they claim.
No, there is a lot of fraud. There is waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. There's no.
Give us an example of the fraud, though.
people who are ripping off, applying for benefits when they're not entitled to them, contractors in the Pentagon that are overcharging or doing add-ons.
The overcharging, yeah, I think we need to find it and be specific. The people who don't deserve the benefits, I mean, I don't know. You know, the problem I have with that,
Not
Congressman,
people who
is
don't deserve the benefits, people that are like using phony Social Security numbers and things like that. That type of stuff takes place. I
yeah,
mean,
I guess I wonder, you know, so here's the thing. Any large system will have some of that. I would never deny that.
absolutely right.
And also, the risk of granting them that it's an epidemic is that people say, see, this is why we shouldn't have these programs to begin with. I want to make them fight to convince us that this is really happening. Like
Yes.
intellectually, I know it must be to some degree,
No,
but
no,
let's
no.
make them prove it, right?
No, you're absolutely right about that. That's why the way they're doing this is absurd.
Yeah,
The idea that they said, let's lay off all these people willy-nilly across all these departments, and they realized all of a sudden we're laying off people who are responsible for guarding the nuclear stockpile.
right.
Oh my gosh, we got to bring them back. They try to bring them back, but they've been knocked off their government emails, so now they can't contact them. There's a bird flu taking place. There's a
Yep.
measles epidemic taking place in Texas, but they're firing the employees that are responsible for overseeing fighting those different types of epidemics. You've got they come out and they say, we're going to give you a buyout if you leave early. We're going to give you a payoff if you leave early. But if you're in the IRS, you can't take advantage of the buyoff until after the tax season. So the people don't take advantage of the tax. Then they get laid off
Right.
in the middle of tax season when people are trying to get their refunds and people are trying to file their taxes. It doesn't make any sense. You should not be going after the low wage probationary employees that have just been hired. You should wait until people retire and then not refill those positions. People
Right.
retire from the high level salaries and then just don't refill those positions.
Right.
And use technology and consolidation. There's a way to manage this. Right now, it's so chaotic. And I think that both Trump, who was not in government before other than serving as president, but was never did the nuts and bolts of government, and Musk, who's only been in the private sector and is not really, they have no respect for the complexity of this organization that provides life-saving services to people. So it's almost like they have a disdain for government. And some
Yeah.
of these programs are essential. This whole stuff of giving these 20-something-year-old tech guys access to people's private information is what galls me more than anything.
Yeah.
You know, there's people who, let's say you have somebody in your family who's got a mental health illness and then they got a prescription drug, or somebody who's got some sort of got AIDS, or somebody who's you know, something that you don't want these kids snooping around on people's personal data, the access to people's bank accounts. Who knows what their keystrokes that they're making, that they're changing, and what they're doing with the information that they have access to. There's a reason that people have to go through confirmation hearings or get security clearances or go through background checks, because you want a high level of security that people's personal data is going to be secure, and they're just giving it away to these young kids.
Yeah, no, they both seem temperamentally unsuited to the tasks at hand. We have been speaking with Democratic Congressman Tom Suozzi from New York. Thank you so much for talking to us today. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate you. Keep up the good work.